It is May 3rd, 2019, 10:03 a.m. at the home of Hart Hasten, the brother of Mark Hasten, who we've already done on tape. I just want to ask you a couple of questions from the war period, because it's a fascinating story. When your father, in his brilliant prescience, understood that we've got to go with the Russians retreating, weren't there hundreds of people in that retreat back to the border?
Maybe dozens of Jews, but
because they were afraid to take a chance?
Not hundreds. No, it's not that. The common wisdom of the time was like in World War I, a family stays together. My mother said to my dad, "Where are we going? And why? Why can't we stay together?" And he said, "I just have a bad feeling about..." And of course he heard some stories of what was happening when the Germans occupied half of Poland. You know, they divided up the country Poland between the Soviets and the Germans, and he heard stories about atrocities already taking place. And another thing why he felt that he shouldn't stay, because he was a policeman in Bohorodchane, the shtetl Bohorodchane. And he felt that when the Germans come, he'll be probably the first victim. You know, the Ukrainians we knew were anti-Semites, and they didn't like Jews, and they would collaborate with the Germans. He knew that too. So he said, "I just think we need to leave," and Mother said no, and I know the date exactly when we took off, and that was June 28th, 1941.
The week after.
I got the dates later on from four survivors, not four, actually two of them that survived, and these were the ones that we saved. I don't know whether you know that part of the story. You know, our neighbor, a tailor, had 7 kids, 4 boys and 3 girls. And when he saw my dad already had a horse and buggy ready to take off, he came in and he pleaded with my dad, "Please take the boys. I have a bad feeling that maybe the girls, we will survive, but I'm sure the boys, they're actually military age, like 18, 20, 22, 24. Those were the ages of the 4 boys." And he scratched his head a little bit, my dad. I was 10 years old at that time when I listened to this conversation. And Mother still hasn't made up her mind whether she was going to leave. So finally he says, "Look," and I will never forget this conversation. Dad says, "We got to leave." Mother says, "Berish," that's how she called him. His name was Dov, or Bernard. And she says, "Do you see anybody else leaving? Anybody?" He said, "No." Why should we not stay together as a family as we survived World War I? And the Germans were okay at that time. And he said, "No. If you don't come with me, I am taking off by myself, and you stay with the kids." And in the last moment she says, "No, I just think I should be with my husband and the children together." And we took off. It was about after 11 o'clock at night, close to midnight.
The soldiers who were retreating saw you?
Yes, they were already retreating, the Red Army.
The Red Army. They didn't say to you, Who are you? Where are you? Where are you going?
No.
Nothing.
It was just the road. We just took up a little space on the road with a horse and buggy. No, they didn't bother us at all. No.
Your father had heard Hitler's speeches on the radio, correct?
He heard who?
Hitler's speeches on the radio.
Of course.
And he would tell the neighbors,
Yes.
I know what he's saying, and listen to what he's saying.
Yes.
He's not lying. What would the neighbors say to your father?
As I said, there's not a single, we had, I don't know exactly how many families lived in, maybe 1,500 families. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to leave.
Could you spell the shtetl? Spell the name of the shtetl?
Spell it for
Yes.
you? It's a long spelling.
I know.
First, it's pronounced Bohorodchane. So it's BOBORODCZ, as in zebra, ANY, Bohorodchane.
Okay.
In Yiddish, it was called Brochen. And we were very close. At that time, the city was Stanislav in Poland. Now they changed the name, and now it's the Ukraine. It's no longer Poland. And the name of the city, Borochane, stayed the same name. And the larger city close to us, about 20 kilometers, is called now Ivano-Frankivsk. Ivano-Frankivsk.
Okay. You tell the story of how you 4 times almost didn't make it. The one that interested me was when you were a year later, or 2 years later, when I think you were already in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
When you heard the doctor tell your parents,
Yes.
Tell me the story.
Yes, I contacted typhus.
Which was common to do. I mean, it happened.
Yes. And the illness is transferred by lice. You probably know that. And I started recovering already. Usually it takes a week, with with fever, high fever. And then they're kind of, later what explained, there are 2 kinds of typhus. And one of them is internal and the other one is external. Mine was internal. And once you even recover from it, you have to be very careful with the diet. And of course you're very hungry, and I was so hungry I went down from my bed and I ate some potatoes. That's all we had. We were starving. And sure enough, I came down again with it. And a friend, our doctor, who was a friend of ours, a Russian doctor, came to examine me, and I overheard him say this to my mom and dad: I don't think he's going to make it, so you better prepare it. Prepare yourself. He's not going to make it through the night. And I heard that, and I felt it too. I said, I felt I was losing it, And I probably already lost some conscience too. Lost conscience, and then recovered a little bit, but early in the morning, he was there in the evening, about 4 or 5 in the morning, I kept feeling better. And later in the morning, I felt good. And my parents were, of course, crying all night, and I said, "What are you crying for? I'm feeling okay."
And what did the doctor say when he saw you next?
The doctor was shocked. He said I didn't expect him to live. And thank God. That's why I believe in Hashem. There was a purpose for us to survive. So I made it. So that was the worst the worst time. And then I also had other problems.
Yes.
You know, we were bombed. And
Yes.
So the bombs exploding, and my dad says, "Keep your head down, Hetche." That's my nickname, Hetche. That's Herzl. And Hebrew is Naftali Hertz, is my name. And but I saw the planes, and I looked. I was interested in the bombs. I saw them come down, but none of us got hurt. None of us.
How close were the bombs?
Very close. I mean, yeah, they were exploding. Did my brother mention this to you?
Yes,
he did. Also.
Yes. He knows all the stories.
Yeah, he was on the same. They sometimes ask me, was it a covered wagon? I said, no, it wasn't covered. It was raining. We were soaking wet, you know, and it rained quite often, you know, on the road. And I really, to this day, when I think, for so many weeks we were on the road until we got on a train. And no change of clothing, no shower, you know, and use facilities under a tree, under a bush. And then I think about women, my mother. How did it? I just cannot believe to this day that we survived just that, those weeks and weeks on the road. I don't know. I wish I remember how many weeks, unless my brother remembers how many weeks we were on the road.
I don't remember. But what it must have felt like, the age of 11, to hear the doctor say he's not going to make it. A person would just say, "I'm dead. Okay, so lie down. Goodbye. Goodbye." I mean,
no.
The strength to have.
There is something there, you know, that, and it's hard to explain. I mean, I think it's hereditary. You know, my dad was tough. My dad was in the World War I, also in the army, and I remember many times. In the morning, he would jump out of bed, and I says, "Dad, why are you jumping out of bed? Why can't you just?" That's the army, you know. That's how he was disciplined like that. He was very disciplined. The only time, of course, we were always starving, and every so often, you know, my dad would try to organize. They call it organize a loaf of bread, you know. And one time he brought a salami, and this is the first time when I never, you know, we always ate kosher. We're a very observant family, and I knew it wasn't kosher. And I says, "Dad, this is not kosher." And he looked at me. "Eat it." And I knew later on, I explained, you know, this is pikuach nefesh. He looked at me, you know, I probably weighed maybe, I was 10 years old, maybe 40 pounds or something like that. I mean, I didn't look at it the way he saw it.
He was always a very practical man.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he understood, Lamashal, for example, he understood to leave when after a week after Operation Barbarossa begins. He understood to go on the train back 50 kilometers, get on the train, bribe the conductor to make sure he stops in your town.
To get out
to get out
of Kazakhstan.
Yeah, right. Get to Moscow.
That was also
right. That's
very exactly. He knew. This I remember even more because I was already 14 years old.
Yes.
At that time, and it was like 4 in the morning. You know, the train sometimes would stop. That's the train going. I think it was Tashkent, Moscow. You know, a 3-4 day train ride. You know, and sometimes it wouldn't stop at our station, which was called Stanция Alga. I looked it up not long ago. It's on the map in Kazakhstan, and they had about 15,000 people living there at that time, and it hasn't changed. They have still about 15,000. That's what the encyclopedia or Wikipedia told me. It's still there.
Your father told the family, I'm going back 50 kilometers to get on the train?
Yes, and we were waiting for him at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the train stopped, and I saw my dad waving, and we got on very quick. We had some belongings, but they're all lost. You know, we never saw him again. You know.
You must have lost everything along the way, at every stage along the way.
Yes, we did.
In other words, anything you picked up in one place, you lost in the next place.
Exactly. You know. Yeah, it's all miraculous. Everything was miraculous. You know.
What do you think the ultimate purpose was? The Eibishter was having you live for what?
There was these things that went through my mind many times. Somebody expressed it so much better than I. Does Emil Fackenheim?
Sure.
Fackenheim, we had him as a scholar in residence in Indianapolis. We had a chair at the Indiana University, so we brought in many scholars. And he was one of them. And he said, he was a philosopher, as you know, we must not give Hitler a posthumous victory. If you give up, and many did, you know, many people did not. So even if they survived, they decided we have nothing to do with Judaism. And my dad was just the opposite. You know, we'll make it. He always, so many times, but I used to ask him, Tatu, you know, that's how we call him, Tatu. I think it's Polish.
Well, Yiddish is Tati.
And yeah, Tati, that's right, Tati. But it is still from Polish. Tatu, are we ever going to have enough bread to eat? Because in the 4.5 years we were in Kazakhstan, I don't remember ever going to bed on a full stomach. I mean, I was always hungry. And he would always say, oh yes, my dad, oh yes, my son, oh yes, well, you just wait, you know, we'll be okay. We'll make it back, you know, oh yes, we'll be fine.
That's a pretty extraordinary, optimistic outlook in the middle of World War II to think that
yes,
the right side would win and you'd survive and thrive.
Yes, but he always positive. Yes, we'll make it. And he himself, which I didn't know later on, I found out that bread was rationed. You know, I used to stand in line for hours to get
from
bread.
4 a.m. to 8 a.m.
And he would give it to me. You know, Mark was already gone. He was drafted into the army, and but he went hungry, and he gave me his portion. You see, and I get emotional about that. Because when we finally did get back, he never recovered from because I said he very seldom this happens to me, but yeah, he rescued us. And then another nice thing about my mother, although my dad says, eat it, kosher or not kosher, you need to survive. You're not going to live if we don't do this. As I said, I thought about pikuach nefesh, and my mother never touched anything that wasn't. In fact, she was pretty much a vegetarian, you know, because she never the meat. Even there was a shoichet
in Kazakhstan.
In the city, but she didn't trust him, you know. She saw him once come out of some kind of a little restaurant or whatever. There weren't that many restaurants, and she said, "I don't trust this man." And his shchita is not, you know, but if we once in a big while got a chicken, you know, no. So she never touched any meat, and mother lived to be 102. Alei Shalom, yeah.
You're now 11 years old, 12 years old, 13, 14. As a child that age who has survived on strength, on his wit, did you not feel that you were smart, that you would like to go steal some food from this place and that place?
The only time, no, we would never do that, no. I don't think Dad or Mother would ever. But in the Soviet Union, as you know, they have the kolkhoz, which is collective farms. And of course, that's why socialism or communism, and I hear about it today, people think, I usually tell them, you want me to tell you a little bit about a communist?
How it works, right.
How it worked? But they don't listen, the young people. So one kolkhoz, you would have cabbages, for instance. They would put out, you know, tons of cabbages, and they would rot. They would put them outside. You're not supposed to touch it, but my dad used to say, let's get some cabbage here so we can bring it home. So this is like stealing, you know, but again, for survival. But we never, other than that, no. No, Dad would never, or Mother would never allow that, no.
What did you do for Pesach Seder?
Oh, this was tough. I don't remember too much about it, you know, except because it was also against the law, you know, praying and under that system is also, we would have to lock ourselves in a room and put sheets on the windows so nobody would see us. And the same thing on Yom Kippur. By the way, my mother, Alei Shalom, we didn't have a calendar. And she actually created a calendar for us, and she was correct every time. We knew when Pesach and Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah would be. She knew it. And we saved it, you know, we have that calendar, that she actually kept the calendar. So on Yom Kippur, you know, we would try to get a minyan. There weren't that many Jews there, but again, it would be in secret, you know, we would shut the doors and the windows would be covered and we would pray. So your question was about
how you made it. Did you make a Seder? If you didn't make a Seder, what did you have between any of the things that were required?
We had flour. We would do something with. We would have matzahs, but
grape juice, wine.
We didn't have grape juice. No wine. I don't think we had. No, we didn't have anything like that. No, we would just whatever we could, you know, try to keep. Get rid of chametz as much as possible, but I don't remember too much about sitting down at a Seder and so on.
There wasn't much to sit down to. If you barely had matzah, you certainly had none of the other ingredients in the Seder table.
Nothing else.
Right.
No,
right.
We didn't. No.
Last story about the war. You talk about your grandfather being shot because they wanted to be chairman of the Judenrat.
Yeah.
First of all, how do you know that story?
From 3 different sources. That one of them I personally talked to. He survived. He was in the Russian army. We went back twice. Did you know that? You know. Actually, I never wanted to go back to Brochin, to Borochan. But Simon Wiesenthal, we were very friendly with him. We went in a DP camp in Austria for 5.5 years.
Yes.
He used to come into our home. So Simon Wiesenthal came one day and he said, you know, about Boro, I remember my dad used to call him Engineer Wiesenthal, Shimon Wiesenthal. Now he's known as Simon Wiesenthal. And he said, you know what happened in Borochana, you know? There was the rabbi there was the first victim, and he was shot with his grandson, Lonka. And I looked at him and I says, Mr. Wiesenthal, that was he wasn't the rabbi, he was my grandfather. He knew what happened. He was the very first victim, but he was shot in the square. He took him with the Nazi wanted to make sure Jews would have to behave and do what they are told. And this man did not want to serve under Judenrat, and took out the pistol and he shot him. And then my Lonka, my best friend, my cousin, we were like brothers, like twins actually. And when he started screaming, he shot him too. So these are the two sources, and one more source also told us, you know what happened, the very first person that was shot by the Nazis in Borochana was the man with the beard, you know, and it was my grandfather.
How does that story make you feel?
Not anymore now so much. When we came back, when we returned to the shtetl, no, we never went back to the shtetl because they said they're going to kill you. So we were in Lemberg or Lvov, now they call it Lviv. They changed 4 times the names. In Polish, Lvov, actually 4 times, you know, the city of Lvov. So when we returned, we stayed in Lvov. This is the largest city in Galicia where we lived. And how did I feel? So when they told us you can't go back, and we realized, because we always thought somebody must have survived for such a big family, from my father's side, from mother's side, 9 siblings from father's side, 8 siblings from mother's. Somebody survived. No one survived. And at that age, when I was a teenager, I was really angry. I was mad. I says, those bastards took advantage of Jews who didn't defend themselves, didn't do anything about it, and they went. And I always think about, I don't want to get emotional again, you know, what their last thoughts were when they knew they were going to die. Because also Simon Wiesenthal also wrote in one of his books, he had dates. I don't know if you ever saw that. You saw that?
I had the book.
There is one paragraph, in July 1942, the last 1,200 Jews from Brochin were taken to Stanislav or Ivano-Frankivsk now, and were slaughtered at Rudolph's Mile. So that's when I decided to go back. When I read this in his book, and we went back and we found a mass grave, and I figured that some of my family is there. So we asked, there was a rabbi there, Victor Kolesnik, and I told him we want to put up a mitzvah, which we did. And it's there, so we went back to dedicate it. And 9 years later, and my brother came along, and when we did that, so
I was also asking on the moral issue, because, as you know, the Judenrat is a very sensitive subject. Those who criticize vociferously those people who served on the Judenrat, and those people who defend them, saying it was a time that you can't understand and can't make moral judgment because of the situation that was going on. So the question is, did you ever say to yourself, maybe he should have served on the Judenrat?
That he should have done what?
He should have been on the Judenrat?
No, not at all. No, he was right. No.
He was right.
Just the opposite. The only thing is, in the family, my dad, Olav Shalom, maybe that's another reason why we left. He heard Jabotinsky speak.
And he took your brother with him.
I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
So your brother,
My
brother
Mark told me
okay.
that he went. He was 8 years old.
Yes.
And he went to Warsaw with your father to hear him speak.
No,
Not Warsaw. No.
Not Warsaw.
Not
probably
Warsaw.
Stanislav. Probably
Yes.
in the big, larger city. And he met, and he. I don't know whether he met Jabotinsky or he definitely heard him talk.
Yes.
And he believed him. And of course, Jabotinsky spoke in Yiddish, and he told him, Jiden liquidier dem Golus, ob nicht wird der Golus eich liquidieren. Liquidate the Galut, the diaspora, or else it will liquidate you. So, so we always heard about Jabotinsky, and you got to defend yourself, and you got to learn how to shoot. You know, that's what he used to say. But very few people that followed him or listened to him. But Dad believed it. You know. Excuse me 1 second.
Please. So always in our family, my dad, as I told you, he served in the police force when the Russians came in. He was also very smart about it. We had a store, and he knew under the communist system, you're a bourgeois, as they say. And so he got rid of the store. What did he sell?
Leather. You know, in the old country, when you wanted a pair of shoes, you went to buy the leather, and then you have a shoemaker make your shoes. So he did that, and he decided to serve as a policeman too, because he also. So he taught me how to shoot. You know, I to this day I can take a rifle and load it, and it was so natural to us. He always had a gun, you know, my dad. And I also have a gun, always, in Indianapolis. I don't have it here. And I remember telling Josh, you know, I says, get a gun. And it saved his life, you know, at one time. And he did. It took him a year to get it. You know the story probably.
I don't know that story. No, I know he has a gun. I've seen him.
Well, he shot in the air. They were attacking him. They wanted to pull him out of the car. And he just got it on a road, which he shouldn't have gone, and they were coming in. He called them with the cinders. They were gonna kill him. So he took out the gun and he shot in the air. Then they took away the gun from him for a week. He couldn't get it back because they had to interrogate him. Why did you shoot, even if it's only in the air? You know, but it saved his life. So anyway, we always, you know, so Jabotinsky always said, you gotta organize yourself and defend yourself, and this did not happen. And this is why when you called, I was thinking about, you know, never again. It became just a slogan. You know, I know so many liberal Jews. I used to say my best friends are American liberal Jews, and when I start discussing things like that with them, I can't believe that they are so naive about these things. And so the main question that you asked me, I was very, very bitter, almost to say bitter, about, you know, about what they've done to innocent people, you know, what they've done to my family, my best, you know, my cousin, Lonka. The last name was Shine. It just came to me. I didn't think about that. And they were gone. So even as a youngster, you know, I already thought about it as a teenager, you know, what should Jews do about these things? And when I see anti-Semitism right now, I say very similar. we got to respond to this. I mean, I see Jews are running away, and these anti-Semites run after them, and they really literally run. I would become a Kahanist very quickly, and that's what needs to be done. You don't touch a Jew. You will. Even at my age, I just turned 88. You know, if some anti-Semite would do something like that, I'd take him up on it. I don't care, even at my age, and you may be very young. No way. You have to. This is why Begin became my hero. You see, because of that, because he says we got to fight back the way he did with the British. You whip our boys, we are going to whip your boys, and if you hang one, we're going to hang yours, which he did. But that is, you know, you have to have a spine. I can't go along with some of these liberal ideas that, you know, or you turn the other cheek or something. I think it was one time I heard Asa Weitzman say, those who how did he, I remember exactly what he said, those who preach about turning the other cheek have never been slapped. You got to slap back. And well, thank God that we have a country, Israel, and my grandson came here yesterday, visit with us. He is a captain in the Sayeret Nachal, and he came with a gun, and he took a picture. I said, I want the gun. I want to hold it. And he took a picture of it, and he didn't send it because he probably should have never let me hold a gun. So he sent it to his mother, and we had breakfast there this morning with our daughter, and she showed me the picture, and I had the gun right there.
I read that you first heard about Begin in the DP camp?
Yes.
So tell me the story. Tell me.
Yes. The funny thing is, he and I both were in Shomer HaTzair before we went over to Beitar. And when we came back to Poland, you know, we found we found my father Mark, my brother Mark, and we lived in Poland near Warsaw, in a little town called Włocławek, and what was the question?
About first hearing about Begin in the DP camp.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You were at Shomer HaTzair. When were you at Shomer HaTzair, though?
Yeah. So there was only a Shomer HaTzair. There was nothing else about. And there was no other part. There were a few people, the survivors from the concentration camp.
In the DP camp, you had...
No, this was not yet DP camp.
Okay.
At first, we were still in Poland.
Okay.
When we returned, we were still in Poland.
Were there Zionist youth groups in your town when you grew up?
Yes, but I was too young I did not join any. I went to Cheder, but that's about all. But this was just... in fact, I remember the fellow that came to visit from Israel to Włocławek. This was a small town near Warsaw, and he was from Shomer HaTzair. In fact, he became his name was Barzilai, Yisrael Barzilai. He became, later on when the state was established, he became the ambassador to Poland, and we met him. And he told us beautiful stories about the kibbutzim in Israel, and this was music to our ears. That's where you want to go to Israel. And so he talked about Shomer HaTzair, and he organized from those few people that were Włocławek, young people. So I was in Shomer HaTzair. Well, Menachem Begin was in Shomer HaTzair, also where he was born, in Brisk, and. So when I heard the first time, we were in the British zone first. We were in several DP camps.
In Austria?
The first one, yeah. The first one was St. Marain, you know. And so Dad said, I don't want to be with the British, and we don't, because they were our enemy at that time. So we went to the American zone, and we wound up, most of the time, we were about 4 different ones, but in near Linz, Abelsberg, DP camp, we were there for a long time, but almost 4 years in this one camp. So I heard the name Begin the first time, and what he was doing in Britain, in Israel, under their mandate.
What year is this?
This is 1946. Because we were still in 45, we were still in Poland, and then we were there for almost maybe not even a year. And then we realized that the Soviets were pretty much in charge in Poland at that time, and Dad says, we got to get out of here. We're not. In fact, there was almost a pogrom in Wrocław, which I witnessed. You know, rumor came out that there was a Jewish butcher, and they found a finger of a child in the meat. Blood libel. And they were gathering already, and I watched this whole scene, and they were trying to get into the butcher shop, and he was a survivor from a concentration camp, so he took his axe and he stood on the door, and he says, anybody that gets too close to here, he says, I'm not afraid of you guys. That's how he talked to the Poles. And they didn't dare, they didn't cross, and then they dispersed. But they were close to another pogrom, which I have witnessed. And after that, Dad says, we got to get out of here. So we crossed the border. I remember that. It took us several times to get across, and to Czechoslovakia. From Czechoslovakia, we were there for a couple of days. And then another border to Austria, and that's where we wound up in a DP camp and stayed there for 4.5 years, and finally made it to the States.
But there must have been a mixed feeling. You've just survived the war, and everyone else has been killed.
Yes, exactly.
So in that sense, you're ecstatic. You made it through, and there's no more Hitler.
Exactly.
On the other hand, you're living in a DP camp. You're in a squalor. You have nothing.
Yes, exactly.
How do you balance that in your head?
Yes, and this is when you asked me that, I said, you know, I was at that time I felt that there were so many mistakes made by the leadership of the Jewish leadership, and they misled us, and we had these socialists, which was very, very similar, because Dad used to say, because we had many Jews that became communists, socialists, and of course the Soviet Union was paradise. And my dad used to say quietly to us, he says, where is the paradise? We are here, we are starving, you can't say a word, you know, because if they find out. They used to call him in every so often, the NKVD, at that time my dad. And he said, how come you're not a citizen of Russia, in Kazakhstan? My dad always said, I'm sorry, but I'm Polish, and I'm going back to Poland. I don't want to be a citizen. And that was dangerous too. But in fact, those 4 boys that Dad rescued, the tailor's sons, they accepted the Russian citizenship, and then when the war ended, they stayed in Russia. They couldn't get out. Okay, but at the very end, we found 2 of them alive in Beersheba, and the reunion was unbelievable. So as soon as I found out, after we went back, I told you, to Borochana in '93, my wife and Josh went with us. He was 17 at the time, And he took it very hard, Josh too, what we heard and what we saw. And the Ukraine now, no longer Poland. So we found out, I'm trying to think of the guy's name who survived. I told you that he was in the in the Red Army, and he survived, and he told us many stories, including the death of my grandfather.
By the way, was that your father's father or your mother's father? Your grandfather. Was it your mother's father or your father's father?
Mother's father. Mother's. Halpern. His name was Avrom Yechiel Mechel Halpern. My brother's son is named after him, Rabbi Michael Hasten. Have you met him too?
No. So in the DP camps, were they organizing Jews around, well, the kids, in youth movements? How did that work?
Yes. So we had Beitar. So, okay, yeah, we are back to Begin, how,
right.
When I heard the first time name. And of course, I'm now 14 years old when I came to hear, 14 or 15 when I heard the name Begin. And so the Shomer HaTzair used to propagate,
I'll bet. Fascist.
That plus what is this? A two-state solution. And no, it wasn't two-state. It was not before a state. It was the bi-national state.
Yes,
that's what we're talking. And they never talked about a state. They talked about a homeland for the Jews. Jabotinsky, Begin talked about a state. We want a state. And I used to say, what the hell am I doing here with the Shomer HaTzair, with a bi-national state? It's time. Look what we suffered. Look, we finally, we survived the Holocaust and all this and World War II. And now we're going to have a bi-national state. It's time to have our own state. So that's when I followed Begin, and he became my hero. And then I met him in the flesh, not until 1969. And he didn't disappoint me, And we hit it off right away. It's like love at first sight, He says, you want to hear that part?
Yeah.
So again, he was my hero for many years. And then, when I finally could afford it, I went from Indianapolis to Chicago. I knew he was the speaker for Israel Bonds in Chicago. And I told my wife, we already had one child at the time. I got to meet my hero. I got to go. And so I went. It was 1969. I'm trying to think. So I had one child because she was born in '64. She was 5 years old at the time. Our daughter, the one we just had breakfast with. And so I went. And so he gave a great speech. And then people were standing in line to shake his hand, after he spoke. And so did I. I stood in line. Finally, he shook his hand, and I said, Mar Begin, I used to be in Beitar. And he was kind of surprised. He thought these are all fat cats, we call them. You know that expression, right? And here comes a guy, I was in my 30s. You were in Beitar? Where were you born? And very briefly, people are waiting in line, and I said, well, I was born in Poland. And how did you survive? I said, in Kazakhstan. Oh, yeah. And he kept asking me a question, and then he realized he couldn't, I couldn't tell him too much, but I did tell him my name, Hart Hasten, and I live in Indianapolis. I came to listen to you, and I used to be in Beitar. So he said, Hart, right away. He called me Hart. You see that table over there? Let's meet at that table over there after I've shaken hands with everybody. And sure enough, I went over there and waited, and then when he was done, he came over, and he starts again asking, bombarding me with questions, you know, what about this? How did you survive? And who else survived? So whatever in this, you know, short time, I was telling him this. And then, and that's something that I mentioned it in my presentation last Saturday, about 3-4 Israelis came over. They wanted to shake his hand. And so he did shake their hand, and then he says, listen, fellas, Chevra, I think he called them Chevra. Chevra, this is Hart Hasten here. Do you know what he went through, how he survived? And he starts telling him everything that I told him. It's like, and I always knew that later, that he had a photographic memory. He remembered not only my name, but I was in Kazakhstan, and I survived, and how we fled, and how we, and I couldn't believe it. You know, as I said, he didn't disappoint me. He was, and then he said, okay, when you get back to Israel, he tells me, he says, call me. Here's my number. I says, Mardegin, I've never been to Israel yet. Okay, but you're going to go. I says, absolutely. And call me. And I said, sure. And I took the number, and a year later I went to Israel. This was 1970. And I did call him. And he says, let's have breakfast at the King David Hotel. You know. And I must have paused a little bit or something, because I was just thinking to myself, why the King David? You know, he blew up King David. You know, and he sensed that. So okay, so I did, and we met exactly on time. He was right there on time, and he says, let's have. He said, I noticed that you kind of hesitated when I said the King David. Do you know why I want to come? I love to come to King David and have breakfast here, and I said, it's not what you think. And because I thought about, you know, what happened at the King David Hotel when he was in the underground. And he says, I'll tell you why I want to come here. And then he explained to me, he said, when I came to Israel in 1942, I was a private, and I was in Polish uniform, and I was translating for Anders, General Anders. This was the British headquarters here too, and General Anders was here too. So I wanted to come through the front door, and there was a Polish officer stood there. He says, no, you can't come through the front door. He says, you got to go through the back. Now I love to come through the front door. That's why I like to come to the King David. I'm just telling you how he explained it to me.
The first time you had met him, you had said to him that your brother was on the Altalena.
Yes, of course, I mentioned that. Yes, I did mention that, sure, yes. And yes, absolutely. And so we just hit it off. And when I mean hit it off, he became a real friend. I mean, somebody sent me just 2 days ago. I invited him to come to Indianapolis, and he came twice. Once he came in '73, and we already started a school in '70, so we were 2 years old, the Hebrew Day School. And then the second time in '76, a year before he became prime minister, and he was the sandak of Josh. You didn't know that until I told you that, because Josh would never mention that.
Not know that.
So he made a special trip. He was in the United States, in Washington, and he came. And this was also a historic event, and because I'll tell you why. So when I mean he was such a wonderful man that people don't know that. Of course, when you read the media, forget it. You know, they used to give him such a hard time. You know, they give him a worse time than they do to Donald Trump nowadays, and it was like the fake news, very similar to that. He was intransigent, and he was fascist, and he was a terrorist, and I remember one time the Time magazine called him he was a truculent. I had to look it up. I said, what's truculent, you know? combative, you know, he's this and I wrote him, I usually don't do that, but in Time magazine they irritated me so much, so I wrote him, and they published they redacted it, as they say, but at least it was there. I says, he's a Jewish patriot, he's a Jewish nationalist, and what's wrong with that, you know? But I was very upset with him. Anyway, so he was really. I also, since I mentioned to you, I talked about Begid last Saturday, and I called him, although being the 6th Prime Minister of Israel, he was the first Jewish Prime Minister. And of course, everybody, you know, I says, don't get me wrong, you know. Ben-Gurion was Jewish, and Golda, and Levi Eshkol, and Rabin. There's no question they were Jewish. But how many of them, when they came to America, would visit with the Gdolei Hador, you know, Soloveitchik, Moshe Feinstein, and the Lubavitcher, you know. How many of them? And how many, when they were invited to the White House, would insist on a kosher meal? How many? That's the way I presented, you know. And the way he spoke, you know, Mirz Hashem, Beli Neder, God willing, and went to the Kotel, you know, now everybody goes to the Kotel, you know. I says, to me, that's a Jewish. In fact, at the White House, by the way, we became so friendly that when he visited the United States, before or after, but mostly after he became Prime Minister, he would always ask, and Simona, my wife, also became very friendly with Aliza Begin. Yeah. We called her Allah, you know, that was her nickname, Allah Begin, and they were also very, very close. And the family, you know, Benny, and in fact, even now, she and Leah, the youngest daughter, they talk every other day, you know, at least once a week when we're in the States, you know. We're very good, still very close with the family. Benny, not so much, because he didn't like the book that I wrote. He said that I mentioned things that he would have not mentioned, because these were, he said, private conversations and personal. And I says, Benny, did I say something that wasn't true? Oh no, everything is true. But these are two personal things that you mentioned. You know, I don't. You know, he was my hero, and I didn't say anything negative. Are you kidding? He was my hero. He was my mentor. He was my role model. I told the people last Saturday, I said, I modeled my life after Menachem Begin. You know, the nobility of the man, the humility of the man, and the honesty, the integrity. I've never found, you know, I met 9 of the 11 prime ministers. I met them personally, because I was involved with Israel Bonds and Federation. I was on the board of the Sukhnut and all kinds of things. When I was younger, I was much more active than I'm now. I'm still I think I mentioned to you, the president of the Friends of Menachem Begin Heritage Foundation in the United States. So we build, you know, we raised the money to build the museum. And Harry Hurwitz was a very good friend. You know him?
Harry's granddaughter married my first cousin.
Ah. Now the one, is this Hillel's son? Oh,
yes.
Like Dr. Hillel Hurwitz. He lives in Ra'anana.
So his daughter married my cousin Jay Wohlgelernter.
How about that? Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know Harry.
Yes.
So it was his idea to to do this. And Benny didn't help us whatsoever to build this building. You know, we raised $23 million to build it. You know.
Why wouldn't Benny help?
Because he's Benny. That's how he is. Yeah, it's his. I don't know. He's very strange about it. Now he does come, and does a little participation, but nothing, you know, too much. You know, he just.
Maybe it's hard being the son of a larger than life hero.
Yeah, that's. I guess so. That's how usually happens. But he's very, you know, bright himself, and is a good member of Knesset and all that.
Yes.
But there's some shtick like that. I don't understand that, you know. But we are friendly and everything, but not as close as my wife is with his two sisters.
Did you take that Zionism from the DP camps? You moved to Minneapolis. You lived there 14 years. You were, of course, making a new life for yourself. You had nothing. But did your Zionism express itself in any way there?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, eventually you became the head of the Cherut Zionists of America.
Because of Begin, he is the one that asked me to do it, and they needed help, and so he says, "You should help us out. You should become the president." So I did. In fact, the only thing that I remember about it, we joined the conference of presidents of major Jewish organizations in my time. In fact, I'm the one, Malcolm Hoenlein, who's been, you know, he took over from Yehuda Hellman, was before him. Does that ring a bell? You know?
I've seen the name. Malcolm I've known for 35 years.
And in fact, I wanted him to be involved with Cherut Zionists, you know, and he was interested, and then Yehuda Hellman passed away, and I pushed him. I says, "You should be he was very, you know, you don't have to tell you.
Smart move.
Very, yeah, he's very talented.
Yep.
So we were members of this organization. I don't think they are now. There is still a Likud.
Yes, American Friends of Likud there is,
yeah,
yes.
do you know Adam Fishman is the...
Adam Fishman, I don't know, previous...
Yeah, he lives in Israel, he made Aliyah too. So he is the executive director of the Likud Zionists.
What did you do as the head of the Cherut Zionists in America? In other words, what, raising money towards what specific?
No. We also went to the conventions that they had, and it wasn't the greatest organization, but we were involved in many things. Raising money was, of course, one of the important things, but we were, as opposed to the labor Zionists, and the main thing is we had a philosophy, we have ideology. We had to tell them that there is such a thing as you know, Cherut, and in other words, you know, at that time they were in power. The labor was in power now for 20 plus years, and it was time for a change. And so we were pushing that part. And I remember we used to have long discussions. Oh, you know, the West Bank and all these things, which always irritated me. You know, the West Bank. Why not call it Shomron and Yehuda? I had one time a big discussion with Yossi Beilin, you know. I says, Dr. Beilin, why do you keep referring to Shomron v'Yehuda as the West Bank? It's not our West Bank. West Bank, I can see Jordan call it West Bank. Why do you keep saying West Bank? Call it what you want. As long as we have peace, you can call it Moshe if you want. This is the response of Yossi Beilin. He caused us a lot of a lot of heartburn, a lot of problems. This is, so we would fight this inside the about 50 organizations that are part of the Conference of Presidents. So they had to hear another voice. And one time I remember, by the way, if we didn't have unanimity on an issue, there wouldn't be a statement coming from the Conference of Presidents. And I remember sometimes sitting till 3 o'clock in the morning arguing with these people who are mostly the liberals and wanted to give away the land and sign it over. And they succeeded. They went to Oslo, and well, look what they accomplished, you know.
Did you ever have political conversations with Menachem Begin?
Oh my gosh, a lot. Yeah, of course.
When things were happening, things in the news, I mean,
yes.
Like?
Particularly after Oslo, you know, particularly when he went into seclusion. Now, he didn't want to see anybody, but he always wanted to see me and my wife. Anytime we went, in fact, when we came here, he wanted to see us every day. Of course, other than that, so there were only 3 or 4 people that he would see. I don't know if you remember Nathan Silver from Toronto. They were very close, Nathan and Lil Silver. And Yechiel Kadashai, of course, saw him every day. And then us. And then Corfu, he lived right next to me, was his neighbor on Semach number 1. He would come in, and he invited him every so often. But us, he wanted to see every day. And I sometimes, now I realize, because I'm older, that I put a lot of pressure on him many times. I wanted him, like Shamir was running. Shamir was running, and he wouldn't say a word, you know. The journalists and reporters kept calling, and never he would pick up the phone. And he did get mad at me 2 times, and now a 23-year friendship, he was upset with me, and he told me that. One time I introduced him, and I always used to say, you know, the first Jewish prime minister, and he's my hero and all this, and then I said, and he's my idol. Well, he didn't like that. So he didn't say anything after he gave the presentation. He came over and he said, "Don't you ever introduce me as an idol. I'm not your idol." He says, "You worship idols?" Again, from a Jewish perspective, he didn't like that he's my idol. And then another time, he also was upset with me because I wanted him out of bed. He really wanted to stay. He didn't want to do anything, and except I used to bring him a lot of books, and he would finish sometimes a book a day. Again, going back to
photographic
memory. And by the way, my wife is very brave, and she said, "You're not going to stay in bed." We were in the nursing home business,
correct,
way back. And she said, she told Benny, and Benny says, "Leave him alone, leave him alone. He wants to stay in the room and he wants to read, and that's it, that's okay, he's a grown man." And my wife said, "Benny, you're so wrong about that. He's got to come out." And so she actually went in without whether Benny liked it or not. And she used to say, "Mr. Begin, you and I are going to walk a little bit today." She would get him out. And he used to say, "Simonele, who are you? You're Napoleon? You're bossing me around?" So I would respond, "Marbegin, you don't know what you just did by calling her Napoleon." because my mother calls her the general, and now you promoted her. And I says, I have to live with her. What are you doing? I mean, that's how we would joke about it.
They say he was a recluse because after Lisa died, he just. Do you think that's the reason?
That contributed to his some of his problems about wanting to be left alone. But the thing that everybody gets an impression, again from the fake media, that he is depressed, he doesn't want to see anybody. Wolf Blitzer, he goes on TV and he says, poor Begin, he lives in a room with no window, and so my wife says she wanted to attack him. She saw him there, and I says, take it easy, Mom. I don't want to start a scene, because he was lying. He does have a window, and he would come out on the balcony, and he lived. He saw how do you say? Jerusalem.
The forest.
Yeah.
Yes, Jerusalem. He lives right by the Jerusalem forest, right?
Yeah. So he would enjoy that. So it's not true. And he would dress up. And when Jeannie Kirkpatrick came, I remember one time, he put on a suit and a tie. He loved her. He was crazy about her. But to say that he was depressed, he had Alzheimer's. I remember reading that. Are you kidding me? We were joking around most of the time when we were there a lot. I mean, really, he had a great sense of humor. I remember one time, I just came to Israel in the morning. Yechiel called me. He says, I was real early in the morning. He says, he knew he had books. He loved history and biography. That was his favorite books, and I would bring him sometimes a dozen or more books. And as I mentioned, he would finish sometimes a book a day. Then I want to discuss it with me. I says, Marbegin, I didn't read these books. It's for you. So I remember he says, I want you to come early, I was going to see him a little later. So I go down here in Jerusalem. At that time was the Hilton, and I grab a taxi, and I says to the taxi driver, take me to Yefenov, and then I'll show you where to drop me off. I didn't want to tell him I'm going to see Begin. Of course, you can't fool taxi drivers, very smart, I was sitting in the back, and he turns around and he says, you by any chance going to see Menachem Begin? I wasn't going to lie to him, and I says, yes, I am. Did he get excited? He's a Sfaradi from Iraq, later he told me, as we were driving. I says, be careful the way you're driving. He's looking at me and he's getting excited. He says, do you know how much I miss this man? He's already been in seclusion for about 3 years. He says, I haven't heard his voice for 3 years. Do you know how much I miss him? Do you know how much I love him? And I'm supposed to ask him how much, And I said, okay, how much do you love him? And he says, I love him more than my wife. So it was funny. So when he drops me off, and I go in, and Begin was already waiting for me, and he gives me a big hug, and how are you? Fine, fine. You came on El Al? I want to give you a sense of humor. Yeah, no, yes, I came on El Al. Oh, you came first class, right? No, my Begin, I came business class. Hart, when I was Rosh Beitar in Poland and in Czechoslovakia, I used to travel by train. And I always traveled third class. Do you know why? So I'm supposed to say, why? Why, Mr. Begin? Because there's no fourth class. And then I'd say, yeah, Marbegin, I must tell you what the taxi driver just told me. He loves you. He loves you more than his wife. Begin looks at me. I hope it's a different kind of love. And I go outside and I read the Haaretz, and it says that he's got Alzheimer's. as Jabotinsky used to say, nicht gestiegen, nicht geflogen. They made it up. You ever heard that expression?
I have heard it, but I don't remember what it means, but I have heard it.
Well, nicht gestiegen, it's not true. It's nonsense. You know. Nicht gestiegen, nicht geflogen. So he had a great sense of humor. They also, when I mentioned one thing, they laughed so hard in shul. And by the way, I don't realize that there are very few people left now that actually met Begin
Correct.
or know anything.
Correct.
So I asked, how many of you did you ever meet Mr. Begin? And only one guy. It was George Klein from, have you heard the name?
From New York Real Estate. Yeah.
He actually gave him a fundraiser one time in New York. And we've been friends for a long time with George. So I told them this story and they laughed hard. So I had the privilege of introducing him to Israel Bond function at the Knesset and the Chagall Hall. There were about 400 delegates from all over the world, actually. And I had the privilege of introducing him. And that was his very last speech that he gave in public, you know. And we actually were celebrating his 70th birthday. Now, he always told us that he'll retire when he's 70, and that was in his mind all the time. And sure enough, so let me back up just a little. So, okay, I introduced him and everything. It was a beautiful evening and everything, dinner. And then the next morning, my wife and I were leaving back for the States. So we went in to say goodbye to Menachem Begin and went in. He would sometimes let Moshe Dayan, who was at that time his foreign minister, he let him wait, and he would talk to us, you know. I mean, you know, I used to say, Mar Begin, your secretary, not secretary, he was minister of foreign affairs. He's waiting. He says, well, let him wait. It's okay. I want to talk to you. You know. I mean, he was, such a friend. So he would say, so when we said, well, we came to say goodbye, he said, oh, Hart, last night you introduced me, it was very nice. He said, but you exaggerated too much, but it came from your heart, you know, again, you know, heart. So he said, I'll accept it because it came from your heart, okay. And then he said, you see, Hart, I'm 70 years old and I'm getting old. And I said, Mar Begin, what are you talking about? 70 years is not old at all. This was 1983. And I said, President Reagan is 74 and he is going to run for another term. So what are you talking about, 70 years? You're not old. Well, Reagan, yeah, he's a gesunter guy. So this one took the biggest, that was the biggest laugh, but I said, a gesunter guy. So when I came home, I get phone calls because about 2 weeks after that, or 3 weeks, I'm not sure, he resigned, It shocked everybody, including Yechiel Kadeshai. He says, he came out of the cabinet meeting and he said, I'm done. I'm resigning. And so I had...
he never told you why?
He never... well, he never said why. Well, he said, "Eneni yachol," so I can no longer do. But number one, of course, I told you that in his mind at 70 he was going to do it. And if Begin says he's going to do something and he does it, I mean, that's number one. And so back to so I explained it. So they. Particularly, he was pressing me on that. There was, I don't know whether you ever knew him, he was the editor of the Jewish Post and Opinion that used to be one in Indiana and also Kentucky. And he was the editor, actually the owner and the editor. And he always called me, wanted to know what's going on and all that. And so he called me, he says, your friend Menachem Begin resigned. He says, did he tell you that? You just saw him recently. I said, no, he really didn't tell me. But you know what? He gave me a hint, and I told him the story. So instead of saying, you know, when I told him about Reagan, who was running again, and he's already 74, so what did Menachem Begin say? I said, instead of saying a gesunter goy, I said, he told me that Reagan was a robust individual. So they got a kick out of that. And then I'll tell you one more story, which is a tremendous story, and nobody knows about that. Nobody ever heard of it. He just won a second term, and in the second term we were here, and we watched it, and we stayed up, and we were in Tel Aviv at the time, Simona and I, and also my other friend, as I mentioned to you, Nathan Silver from Toronto. So we stayed up. And now, so he won. He won the election, and in fact, we went to Metzudat Zev in Tel Aviv. You know, this is the headquarters of the Likud, and we listened to him to accept the acceptance speech. It's beautiful. It was a beautiful evening. Although Peres thought he won. You know, he already wore his blue suit he was going to announce, just like Gantz came out too. He thought he won, and he surprised them. And okay, so we stayed there. We usually stay 3 weeks, 4 weeks in Israel as we go. This is our third week now. We have to leave on Sunday. So he was now negotiating with the Haredim. And of course I told you we were visiting. So I came. My wife was not there at the time, so I came to visit him, and we were sitting, you know, at the coffee table, not at his desk. When I came, he used to come out of his desk and used to come and sit. We had tea. They used to bring in the tea, and all of a sudden, as we sat there, and the door burst open, and there's seven of them, Haredim, shouting and screaming and shrieing. And they didn't go through Kadeshai. Usually they have to go through Kadeshai to get in. No, they just came in, burst out, and they were screaming, and we will not agree to this. And I understood some Hebrew and then Yiddish, and no way are we going to agree to that and all that. And Begin sits there. I'm just looking at it, you know, because he was sitting like over here and I'm sitting over here. And he sits there and says nothing. And they keep on, but this goes on for about 3-4 minutes. When is Begin going to say anything? No, he sits there and he listens. And they're still screaming. Finally, there's a little bit of a pause. Now Begin gets up. And first time I heard him speak Yiddish in public. He doesn't. He always made it a point not to do it. With me, he would speak Yiddish and Polish and Russian sometimes. And as soon as that there was a pause, he says in Yiddish, Rabbi Sai, hat mir schon gedauert Minche. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Hat mir schon gedauert Minche. And they look at each other. And, no. Or do the Wand. So it's quiet, and they get up. And now I told you the end of the story is like this. There were 7 of them. Menachem Begin was 8. Yechiel Kadeshai walked in. Number 9. I was number 10. I made a minyan. And we davened. We finished the mincha. And I have no business anymore. It's quiet, and they sat down and they started negotiations. I'm gone. except in the morning. The next morning I read the headline of the Jerusalem Post. A coalition government was formed yesterday afternoon in the Prime Minister's office. That's how the kind of the psychology that he used, and he was just, I mean, I never called him a politician. He was a real statesman, real statesman. That's my story about that. And the Minche, so I told that story to the Minche. Oh, they got a kick out of it. This was between Minche and Myra.
Right. But in the course of his time, certainly as Prime Minister, you would see him during moments of history, for example, and discuss Sadat's visit, the Nobel Peace Prize, etc.
Yes.
Do you remember his stories?
Many times, and sometimes I would have to really press him to talk about some of the issues. Number one, on the, because I used to remind him, I says, Mar Begin, what happened to the Shtegi Dot Layaden, you know? That was our slogan. That's how we sang that song, Shtegi Dot Layaden.
And the map in the middle.
Zu Shelanu Zu Gam Ken.
Right.
So he looked at me and said, what did you want me to do, start a war with Jordan? Yeah, he comes back at me. And I says, was this propaganda? He says, no, it's not propaganda. It's true. You never, Hart, you never say it is not ours, because you never know what happens in history. He says, look what happened at the Soviet Union, you know. He said, you don't say it's not ours. You never know what happened. It doesn't mean we have to go to war and with Jordan. No, I am not advocating that at all, but you don't sign it over. You don't say it's not ours. It is ours. And the same applied also to the so-called West Bank, you know. In fact, had he lived, he didn't live anymore he died in 92, and then they had the Oslo Agreement in 93. He would have taken it so hard, you know, because he once went to the 100th anniversary of Jabotinsky's birth. He went, and the first time, nobody speaks at the caver of Jabotinsky on Hart Hasten. Nobody. That is the minhag, you know. You don't speak, because of Jabotinsky was a great orator. And that this time, and he said so, he says, Adoni Rosh Bitar, he addressed him. And I have actually I have a copy of what he said, you know. It was recorded. And Yechiel gave it to me in Hebrew, and then we translated it into English. And he talked to him like he would be standing right there, Jabotinsky, and he says, we have conquered Shomron and Yehuda, and this will never be signed over to a foreign power. And Yerushalayim is in our hands now, and this will always be the capital of Israel. And he talked to him like from the heart. And I said, this is only one time, because of your 100th anniversary of your birth, that I take the opportunity to tell you that this is what we did, and this is where we are now. And said, you gave us all, you know, he gave him Yosher Koyach for all what he has done, Jabotinsky, over the years. It was very moving. I have a copy of it, you know, it's very moving. And now, as I said, he would have taken it very hard, yes, the Oslo Agreement.
For sure.
You do not sign over like Paris did, and, well, Rabin and Yossi Beilin was behind all this.
Yes.
Unacceptable completely. And okay, one other thing that you said, what we talked about. One time, during the Paris was the prime minister. He took turns with Shamir, remember? And then he exchanged 2 or 3 Israelis I don't know which country it was. I mean, it's kind of vague now, except there were 1,000 prisoners or terrorists. They exchanged them for those 3. And I want to know what Menachem Begin thought of it. And so I mentioned it. I said, Mar Begin. And he used to follow the news. I mean, he knew what was going on. He just didn't want to say anything. And I said, had you been prime minister, would you have done that? Would you have exchanged for 1,000 of these terrorists? Hart, you know, I'm no longer in power. I'm not the prime minister. I'm not gonna, I don't know. I didn't let him off the hook. I'm begging, I'll ask a simple question. Had you been prime minister, would you have done the same thing? You know, you wanted to free our people. Please don't ask me that. I don't know what I would have done. I don't know. And I said, no, I want to hear from you. I said, I'm not publicizing anything. I'm just wanted to hear your opinion. Okay, I'll tell you this, Hart. If I made the decision to make this exchange, I would have never allowed them to be freed, and they would go to live in the villages or where of Samaria and Judea. They would have to be outside. They would have to go maybe to Europe, maybe somewhere else, to any Arab country, but not here, because they're going to cause a lot of trouble. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. The Intifada started a little bit later with these terrorists. Okay, so I'm just giving you that example. And then I want to mention, I didn't tell you, one more time he was upset with me. So and what was it? So I wanted him again because the telephone was ringing all the time, and they were mostly reporters and journalists. What does Begin think of that? We want to talk to Mr. Begin. Whoever picked up the phone, usually Yechiel Kadeshai would be there, and say, sorry, but he's not available. And I said, Shamir needs help, you know, and I was thinking Menachem Begin could have said something. So I came up with an idea, and I think it was in the bedroom. He was actually in bed reading, and I said, I need to talk to you. Okay. I said, Mar Begin, I know why you became a recluse, and you don't want to see anybody, you don't want to talk to anybody, you're complete seclusion. I know why. Yeah? Why? I think you must have taken a nader. You must have taken a vow, and it may go back to when you were still a prisoner in
Russia.
In Russia and this Siberia. Must have, this is probably why you. Boy, did he get mad at me. I would do such a thing. I would take a nader. Do you know what a nader is? Do you understand that? I says, yes, I do. I didn't back off. I know what a nader is. Yes, that's why I said it. Why would you not say something? Shamir is going to lose this election, and you can do so much if you would just say something to the media when they call. You don't understand what you're talking about. And don't you ever say that to me, that I would take an aider. He was very upset with me. But I didn't give up. I said, it's the only thing I can think of. Well, you're wrong. Okay. About, I'm not kidding, maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, the telephone rings. I think Yechiel Kadeshai comes in and he said, there's a reporter from Paris, and he wants to talk to Menachem Begin, and he wants to talk to you about the election. Begin says, I'll take the phone. He picks up the phone, the receiver, and I hear him say, what kind of a stupid question is it? Of course I want Shamir to win. What kind of a question is that? You know. And then he talked a little bit more. And I think I had something to do with it. But it actually happened right there. And then he responded and he said, of course I want Shamir to win. You know. And then, oh, the guy was so happy. And
when he gets off the phone, did you look at him and he look at you and?
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
You said,
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't. No, I didn't go that far.
Yeah.
He saw my smile on my face. You know, I was so happy about that. But these are the only 2 times that I can remember that he was upset. Otherwise, it was always very friendly, and he was looking forward to seeing us, and we were discussing a lot of things. Yeah.
Did he talk about Camp David, the meetings with Sadat and?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you remember him saying?
And about Carter particularly. Oh, he was mad at Carter.
He hated Carter.
He hated Carter. And Carter, we would call him an anti-Semite. We used to wait. I told you that he would always ask us to come. So this was now the Camp David.
Yes.
And we actually waited for him 13 days, you know, and his wife was we were at the, across the street, the Blair House, you know. So I remember him coming out of the White House. It was close to midnight. And he would just sink into the chair and he says, that guy, I think he may have called him a mumser or something like that. Carter, he says, anti-Semite. He called those nocturnal meetings that he had with Carter, nocturnal. So my Begin, what happened? And so we would sit, my wife and I, and Ala Begin and Yechiel Kadeshai, and he would say, okay, he says he wants to talk about Jerusalem. I told him, Mr. President, Jerusalem is not on the table, there's nothing to talk about. This is the eternal capital of Israel, and it's D.C., David's capital. And there's nothing to talk about. And he would press, and then and at one time he said, I don't know whether this particular time or maybe another time, he would say, he told me, again he brought up Jerusalem, and he said, why don't you just think about it? Don't tell me now, you know. Think about it. Take 3 days and think about it. And he said, when I heard the 3 days, I told Mr. President, I want to tell you a story about the rabbi of Mainz. Have you heard about that?
Yes.
That he said that?
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Well, he told us that story. He says, I told him the story about Mainz. I'm not giving you 3 days. There's nothing to think about. I've told you, Jerusalem is not negotiable. But he didn't like so. In fact, later, Carter came to Israel several times, you know, at least 3 times, and he would always call Yechiel, I want to meet with Begin, and Yechiel said, okay, I'll let you know, and he would ask Begin, and Begin would say, no way, I don't want to meet this guy, I don't want to meet him. Just one time he let him talk on the phone. He says, let me talk to him on the phone. So he connected him with Begin, and he says the conversation was like about 6 seconds. Oh, Mr. Carter, President Carter, nice of you to call. Thank you so much. And he hung up. He didn't want to talk. Yeah, he didn't like Carter. No.
Who did?
Yeah.
No, but then, what did he think about his Nobel Prize?
Actually, we were supposed to go too, and so I don't know what happened at the time. I couldn't make it. Nathan Silver made it. Well, Sadat didn't show up, and that bothered me more than Begin. And Begin said, well, he's got his own surahs, you know, Sadat, so he didn't. So I quote from his speech that he delivered. You know, I have a speech. And one part of it is so beautiful because he defined the peace, the word peace, what it means to him. What peace? Do you remember that? It's actually, if you go through the Begin Center, you see he spoke in English. And I actually memorized that part. And I'm going to tell you what it is, except, so they, at the very end of the tour that you take at the begging center, you have a table there, round, where it has the Nobel Peace Prize, and they have the signatures of the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, and also something that I bought and gave it to the begging center. We donated it, and it's the 8-page speech that he wrote when after they signed the peace treaty. He wrote it out on the stationery of the Hilton Hotel in Washington, and I got this, you know. It was difficult to get, but I got it, and so that's there too. A copy of it is there, and over it is the sayings, the definition of peace, what it meant to Menachem Begin, and that's what it said. You asked me about the Peace Prize. It says the following: peace is the beauty of life. It's sunshine. Peace is the smile of a child, the love of a mother, the joy of a father, the togetherness of the family. Peace is the advancement of man, the victory of a just cause, the triumph of truth. Peace is all of these and more and more. That's poetic, it's so beautiful, but this is what he said when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. By the way, he didn't keep the money.
I was going to ask, first of all, as a person, he's an unav, right? He's a modest person.
Not a penny. He gave it all and established a foundation for it, and Allah Begin asked me to be a member of this foundation. But I never attended any meetings or anything, but they give away the Peace Prize is still from that money. Every year they give a begging prize. A begging prize, not a Peace Prize, a begging prize. And he gave away all the money. That I am not surprised, I was never surprised about that. He would never do that. This was Menachem Begin. I mean, the honesty and integrity is beyond description. I mean, I know so many instances. You know, when he came in '76 to Indianapolis, and he wore a suit, and the threadbare, you know, you could see and I was embarrassed. And Elli ben Elisar came with him. And I said to Ben Elisar, to Elli, I said, Elli, I want him to get a new suit. And my hero, my leader, look at the suit. And I'm sorry, he said. I think he may have said, I talked to him about it, but he thinks it's okay. So there was a tailor, it's called Leon Tailoring in Indianapolis. It's still there. Sholem Ettinger was the owner, and Sholem Ettinger would give his arm to meet Menachem Begin. And I said, I have an idea. We'll go to Leon Tailoring, Sholem, and they will measure him while he is there, and they'll have a suit ready the next day. I'll make sure. And Elli says, you know, it might work. It might work. And so he did, and I didn't go with him. I didn't want to be. I was just like, I'm not involved at all. So Elli went, and I had an envelope with some cash in it to make sure that we pay him right away. And so he went there. The next morning, so I don't know exactly what happened. Elli didn't tell me, except he said he gave him the money, and they did measure him, and he didn't like to be measured, but, you know. The next morning, Menachem Begin gets up first thing in the morning. He comes down. We had guest room is upstairs. He comes down. He says, Hart, I want to give you. I have something for you, and he gives me a receipt from Tel Chai and the exact amount, from the cash that I put in there for Sholem. Somehow he found out there was something going on. He would not do that. And then he said to me, Hart, what's wrong with this suit? What is wrong with this suit? That's Menachem. That's the integrity and the honesty, and no way. And he had a slip given me signed from Tel Chai. It goes to the money goes to Tel Chai. I mean, this is just one example of his honesty. And there's no. I mean, to me, when I see what's happening here, they're trying to indict the prime minister. So, never happened with Menachem Begin. I can assure you of that.
Did he express his pride in winning the Nobel Prize?
Oh, absolutely, yes. He liked the idea, sure. Yes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone. I thought first that he might not go because Sadat didn't go. He knew he wasn't going, and he said, "No, this is he did something important, and no, he prepared a good. And the rest of the speech was also great, but this was just poetry."
When you saw him after he won the first election in 1977,
yeah,
that must have been an amazing moment.
Oh, it was exactly because you know why? He did not expect to win.
Correct.
He did not, and neither did Yechiel Kadeshai. But Yechiel Kadeshai, this is something I hope I'm not bragging about this now. Yechiel was interviewed, and they asked him, after he won the election, did you know that you're going to win the election? They asked Yechiel, and he said, no, I didn't think we were going to win. What about Menachem Begin? And I don't think in fact, he said there's only one guy, as a businessman from Indianapolis, Hart Hasten, predicted that he was going to be the prime minister, which is true. And then Menachem Begin told me later, you had more confidence in me than I did. That's what he said. So he did not, he thought he might, but he wasn't sure that he was going to win. But he did, and I knew he was, because the Sfaradim, they loved him. And I told you the story about, he loves him more than his wife. So an Iraqi Jew, an immigrant to Israel, and he said, I love this man. Yeah. It's
an amazing to have had that experience, to share, what would you say, 26 years, 23 years with him? That you knew him from the first time you met him till?
I knew him when I
from
met him from 69, and he died in 92. About 23 years that I've known him and had that relationship, which is extraordinary. And I realize the longer as time goes on, and I hear people talk about taxi drivers, when I tell them, take me to the Begin Center, and my wife usually says, my husband had something to do with building this. Really? And they say, and my wife says, my husband knew Menachem Begin very well. Or we knew Menachem Begin. They don't want to charge me for taking me. So most of them are Sfaradim, very, very.
Wow.
They love this man.
Yes.
And you can see why. And
did he ever ask you political advice?
The only thing we would discuss about the United States, we would no, he didn't talk to me about
internal politics here. What did he say to you about American politics?
Yeah, we would talk about that, and
he liked Reagan. Except they had that one.
A gesunter guy. Yeah.
No, but they had that one blowout. Not blowout.
It's more than once. But which blowout?
When he was pressuring him, and then Begin gave that famous quote, we're not a vassal state. On money that the United States was giving to Israel, and then trying to dictate terms of things, and Begin said we're not a vassal state.
This was a special. That wasn't.
Getting into the story.
The issue was the Golan Heights.
Okay. Oh yes, when Begin annexed it in '81. Yes.
Yeah, when Begin decided to get it through the Knesset, which was not easy to do, to annex the Golan Heights. They gave him a hard time, in the Knesset, but he finally got it. So he received a letter. What happened is this: he received a letter from the State Department, and in the letter it said something about that Israel will suffer for that; it'll be punished. Israel will be punished.
That's right.
And he didn't like that, so he summoned the ambassador, Sam Lewis.
Right.
And I happened to be there at the time. Now, not with him. I was with Yechiel Kadeshai. And Yechiel Kadeshai was in the meeting, and he came out and he says, Hart, he was all excited. He says, Hart, you won't believe it. You will not believe what I'm going to tell you. Okay, what happened? He says, Menachem Begin summoned Sam Lewis, and he told him, I resent this kind of a letter. Who do you think we are? We are little children that you're spanking them, because who do you think we are? A banana republic? This was the annexation was approved by the cabinet and by the Knesset, and we are a democracy, and that stands, and it will stand. And you can tell your State Department that I don't accept this letter. He was very tough on him. And by the way, Sam Lewis was a wonderful man, and he loved Israel and so on, but he was not gonna take that, and he really let him have it. Yeah. One other thing that I must tell you, and nobody, from all the books and articles that I've been reading all these years, this is never mentioned. The peace process with Egypt credit was given to Moshe Dayan because he went to Morocco and he had a meeting there, and nobody ever really told the whole truth about the peace process. Begin started the peace process as soon as he became prime minister. And I, again, happened to be there. And these are some of the historic events. There were many others, but I wasn't at every one, but it so happened I was there. I was going to see Menachem Begin, and somebody walked out, and Menachem Begin said, Hart, did you see the man walk out? I said, yes. He says, do you know who it was? No. His name is Kovacs. He is the ambassador, Romania's ambassador to Israel. And I just started the peace process. So I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, I asked him to make arrangements for me to go to Romania. That was his very first trip outside as prime minister. And do you know why? I know that Ceausescu is a friend of Anwar Sadat. I want to hear from him directly whether I can deal with a man like Sadat. So I'm going. Not only is he going, but I happened to be here long enough when he returned. And then we talked about that. And one funny story about it, it's so funny, it's unbelievable. So he said he met and it came out pretty good. He gave a very good report. He thought Sadat was the right person to talk about peace. But then he says, I must tell you one story. And this is so funny. So Ceausescu was a communist, of course, and the communist system, he says, so Menachem Begin tells us, he said, he was bragging about the wonderful communism that we have in Romania, he said, and particularly he said, you know, we just, a year ago or 2 years ago, we built a shoe factory. And do you know, Mr. Begin, how many shoes we produce in that factory? And I remember exactly the figure, but he would say something like 56,200 shoes or something like that. That's how many shoes we produce, and only under communism can you do that. You know, he was praising communism. So Menachem Begin told us, he says, when he told me about the 56,000, so he said, I didn't ask him, but I was thinking, was it pair of shoes or single shoes? I'm not, but I didn't ask him that. So I don't know whether it's pairs or just single shoes. Again, when I have Begin's
sense of humor,
sense of humor,
yes. Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, these are some of the stories. Ask me more.
You knew, you said 9 prime ministers.
Yeah, I said 9 of the 11.
11.
There are 11 prime ministers up until
right.
now. I didn't know the two I didn't know. I met Ben Gurion, but I never met Levi Eshkol, and I never met Sharet. You know, the second one. I never met him. Used to be Chertok, his name at that time, you know.
Right.
And I never met. These two I never met, but all the others I met everyone.
When you come from someone at the stature of Menachem Begin, and now you're going to meet the guy in the same room, but it's a different person.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you...
Absolutely, absolutely. It's unbelievable. It's such a difference, you have no idea.
Who of the others did you particularly like?
Well, I was helpful. I was at that time still the president of Cherut Zionists. I was trying to help Sharon. And one incident that you may like to hear. So he called me actually, and he said, so I knew him very well. We traveled together when he was he still already in the government? No, that was before the election. We actually went out, you know.
Which election?
The first election of Menachem Begin.
77.
But he was already, the Likud was already formed. He had a lot to do with Likud, and also Ezer Weizmann had to do with Likud. But we went, he came to the United States, and he and I were traveling to raise money. We had to take care of some debts that had to be paid, you know, that accumulated when they got out of the, when they came out from the Machteret, they owed a lot of money, the party, the Cherut party. So we went to raise money. So I got to know him at that time. And I did this with many people. I mean, I also, with Misha Arens and I went out to raise money. And I remember I forgot his name, or Uzi, Landau's father, Uzi Landau, Chaim Landau, I think his name was. So we traveled also together, and I have many stories about some of these things. So we had to pay off some debts. And so I got to know Sharon, and Sharon called. He said, "I need your help. I'm running." So he asked me, you know, like for instance, he would say, Hart, you know, he was running against Ehud Barak. He said he wants to have 10 debates on television with me. What do you think I should do? I says, no debates, none. You shouldn't have any.
Why?
Because the poll showed he was ahead like by 17 or 18%. And I says, you may go on TV and you may make a mistake and say something. And I says, you're going to win. You're going to win against Ehud Barak, so you shouldn't have any. Yeah, but he said, I have to have some. So I said maybe one, but that's about all. And he did. Only had one. And then he also would ask me, I remember one time it was actually, I said something to him, and then he said that to the New York Times. He was interviewed. And about, you know, the rumors were, you know, he's a general and he'll start a war right away. And I said, he said, what should I tell him? And they asked me questions like that. I says, you tell, like the New York Times, any other publication like that because you are a general and you know about the war, you were wounded in a war. And so he stopped me. He says, yes, I'm 67%, 63% disabled because of the injuries that he had in the war. I said, oh, that's what you talk about. You were disabled and you had friends of yours die on each side. And I says, that's what you tell them. It's just the opposite, you know, because you're a general, you know, that's what you should tell them. And then I saw the quotation almost exactly what he told the New York Times.
Would it be fair to say that you were a financial backbone of the Cherut party outside of Israel?
I wouldn't say financial backbone. I helped them as much as we could, absolutely.
Not necessarily from your own pocket. I mean, as a ringleader.
Yeah, from the United States, yes. But he also would go to Europe and try to raise money, and we did that. And we did take care of all the. And then it was easier to do it when Menachem Begin became the prime minister. It was easy to raise money because the best fundraiser we had was in Los Angeles, unbelievable, and he was already prime minister. And those who opposed him, who were laughing, because my wife reminds me, and she tells people too, she says, my husband, you would introduce him as always as the next prime minister of Israel, and they always hear the chuckles, you know, of course, you know. He sat there for 29 years, and he in the back benches, and all of a sudden he became prime minister. And then my wife reminds him, and then when he became prime minister, so my husband would say, "I told you so, didn't I?" I mean, I hate to say I told you so, but I did tell you so. Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you what it was like to be a backbencher for 29 years?
Of course, yeah. He used to say, but Ben-Gurion they never want to mention his name.
Correct. That person sitting next to so-and-so.
Yeah, next to Dr. Bader. The man sitting next to Dr. Bader, because, but actually, Paula, is Ben-Gurion's wife, liked Menachem Begin. She did. And so it was politics, you know. Of course, the worst part was the Artalena story. Maaseh Artalena, you know, yeah. 16 boys died, you know, and some in Kfar Vitkin, and then on the shores of Tel Aviv, you know. Terrible, terrible thing.
Yes, but Begin said his greatest moment he felt was that he didn't let that moment become a civil war.
One important thing as far as Sadat, why they got along, and maybe you heard about it or not. When he became prime minister, he was told that there's a plot in Egypt to kill Sadat. The Mossad found out about it, and they came to Menachem Begin and they said, what do we do with it? We have this information. Give it to Sadat, tell him. And they did. And Sadat knew that Menachem Begin gave permission, and the plot was
foiled.
Yes.
Before they ever met.
Before they ever met.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is, I think, how they felt each other out, and Menachem going to Romania. That's how the peace process started, you know. But everybody wants credit for it, and particularly, but even to this day, Begin gets the least credit, which he should get the first, you know, and that's how they treated him all these years.
I realized I didn't ask you a question from before.
Yeah.
When you were in the DP camps on May 14th, 1948, do you remember it?
Yes, of course.
What happened? That was Independence Day. What was May 14th, 1948?
Oh yeah, the day that it happened. The excitement was unbelievable. We were dancing through the night. I don't think we got any sleep that night, and we were so happy that there's a Jewish state. And now because we wanted to go to Israel. I never even thought about America at all, but I was already 17. And we were very, very happy. Mark, of course, my brother, was older than I. He was already 22, 23. So he volunteered right away and was shipped out. And I wanted to go, but they said, "You're too young, we can't take you." I wanted to go to Israel. And then when my dad says, and then of course after the war, 1948, Mark couldn't get a job. Did he tell you that? You know, he was in the wrong party. Mm-hmm. You know, he was in Wetzler, so Ben-Gurion did not reimburse. That's why we had to raise the money too for the orphans of the Machteret and the orphans and widows, and so they borrowed money in Europe and in the States. They borrowed. This is before my time, you know, but we had to pay it back, and so we had to go raise the money, and that's what we did. And we paid everybody off, not 100%, but they accepted, you know, and we.
Were you getting letters from Mark in the DP camps?
Letters from Mark, yes, we did, and he told us that we have a problem here, and he decided to come back to Austria, where we were, and then in the meantime, we left before he returned to Austria, and then from Austria he went to Canada.
Yes.
And married a nice young lady, which he knew her. And did he mention, you know, how quickly they got married?
Yes.
They eloped.
Yes.
In Montreal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He did tell me that story.
Yeah.
What are you proudest of having accomplished in your life?
I would say the proudest was the Jewish day school in Indianapolis. This was a very hard time to do this. So I have a chapter on that, because Indianapolis is a very assimilated town, Jews. Assimilation is, you know, the average without the Orthodox is 72% now. In Indianapolis, it's probably 85 or 90% intermarriage. And the whole thing started with my own children. You know, they were, Renee was 71, she was 164, so she was 7 years old. And Bernard, who was here, by the way, Josh's brother, he just left early this morning on business. He came here on business. He lives in Chicago. So they didn't like the idea. So we said, we need some education. I'm not a teacher. I know that there is very little available in Indianapolis. They had an afternoon program, Jewish education. And I want my children to learn about their, you know, their history, their heritage. So we decided, so a cadre, a few people that got together and said, and I write about it, the rabbi is the one that called a meeting and said, those who have children, you know, they were the only, Indianapolis was the only city in the United States with more than 7,500 Jews that don't have a day school. So he suggested that in the meeting. So there were about 30 people there, mostly parents, and the meeting was going where we saw a speaker from Torah Masorah. And I remember I was very shy, by the way, at that time. I don't know why. And I sat I'm way in the back, in the last row, at the synagogue, and they were talking about a day school, and the Torah Masorah person was was Bernie Goldenberg. I remember he died here in Israel already. Most of my friends died. And thank God I'm still alive and still, you know, can think a little clearly. So this was a meeting, except there was a lot of negative people. The same Sholem I mentioned before said, unless you have so much money in the bank, don't you dare start something like that, which you will not be able, you're going to fail. And this went on and on. He kept irritating me so much, you know. Actually, we're talking about $13,000. He figured that you need to start a first grade or a kindergarten or something like that. And and then this goes on for about, the whole meeting was about 2 hours. And all these things we say, should we do this, should we do that? And he kept saying, unless you have in the bank $13,000, don't you dare. And he's a macher in the community. And it irritated me to one point, and I just jumped up from the back and I said, this man, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Because, and besides, we didn't come here to talk about $13,000 in the bank. I mean, we came here to say, is it a good idea or a bad idea to start a day school because our kids need Jewish education? And as I said, and my heart was pounding, I remember, because I didn't like to say anything. I didn't like to talk and speak in public, but he irritated me. And then I said, you know how the state of Israel was established? There was a Herzl who said, Im tirtzu ein zu agada. And that's how it started. It isn't because there was money in the bank, so they started this very similar here. You know, we're talking about, should we have one? If it's a good idea, we're going to raise the money, I can assure you. And I got a lot of applause. Everybody stood up and, oh yes, we need a school, and Hart is right. And the rabbi gets up, he was the chairman, and the rabbi said, well, I am assigning or appointing or doing the Hart to be the chairman of the ad hoc committee to start a day school. And I said, whoa. I don't know anything about day schools. I don't think you got the right man. And don't you dare, I'm not going to be, there's no way. And the truth is this, I never had a day school education. I went to a cheder until I was 8 years old, but that's about it. But I do remember everything what I learned those when I was 8 already. We already learned the Gemara, you know, to this day I still remember Shnayim Ochzin Betalis, you know, and all stuff. So anyway, but they kept pounding at me and coercing me, and finally I agreed, okay, I've never seen a day school, I've never been to a day school, I don't know anything about it, so they made an appointment for me to go to Miami Beach, where Rabbi
Sender.
Alexander
Sender? That's Sender. Alexander, what's his name? I was friendly with his son.
Yes.
Alexander.
It'll come to me. Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah.
From the day school there, and I went there. I spent a couple of days, and I says, "Wow, this is wonderful." They had a new building.
Oh no, he did a great job there. Oh
yeah.
yes. Oh yes. Who was the rabbi at the meeting in Indianapolis?
Indianapolis, Gettinger, right now.
And I just know Rabbi Gray in Indianapolis?
Of course, we had Rabbi Gray for 15 years,
yes.
And he lives now in Lakewood.
He was a student of my father's, so anyway. What question have I not asked you? What have I not asked you that you need to tell for history about anything? What do you think of Benjamin Netanyahu?
Know him very well. He stayed with us more than once. I think 2 times. He was This is when he was still at the United Nations. We had him. I think he's doing a great job. He really is. And he's behaving like an American more than Israeli. He's not a begging, but so I don't see anything wrong. And I don't see any, say he's taking bribes, you know, because he got cigars or champagne. He's the Prime Minister of Israel, for crying out loud. You have to. But I like him because, first of all, he understands economics, and that is so important. And look at the prosperity. And he had the guts to come to the United States and address
Congress.
The Congress, and wasn't afraid to do this. That takes guts, you know. Of course, Obama was such a mumser. What a mumser! What he did.
Worse than Carter.
Yes, I think so. He was worse. He did the more damage than Carter did. When he didn't veto that resolution. Yes. You know, when I go to the Kotel now and I think, oh, Obama said this is Palestinian occupied territory. You must be kidding me. You know, the Kotel. You think we'll ever give it away? The Kotel? Are you kidding me? So probably a Muslim, you know, in his heart, you know, because he was brought up in Indonesia, whatever. You know, but since you mentioned Carter, I'll mention one. You know, another good friend of mine. We became very good friends. He's no longer alive. Hank Greenspun of Las Vegas, and you should look it up.
That name sounds familiar to me. What is it from the film?
He smuggled arms in 1948.
That's right. Yes, no, I knew about yes.
And Schwimmer.
Yes,
Schwimmer.
yes.
And they started Israel Air.
With Smokey Simon and
Smokey Simon also, yeah. I know Smokey.
I interviewed Smokey for this.
Yes. And by the way, he's pushing 100 almost right now.
He's at 90 over. He's 95 for sure.
95. Yeah, he's older than that now. So this story is important so Hank Greenspun was a great Zionist. He was a Democrat all his life. And he supported, you know, he's known as Mr. Las Vegas.
Yes.
And I remember I actually came with Sharon to Las Vegas to raise money. And this is so funny because he came to greet us. We got off the plane and on the runway. He was all the way to the runway with his Rolls Royce. And he said, "It's my wife's Rolls Royce." And he picks us up to go to a casino where they had, I think, 13 people were there. And he gave the pitch, Sharon, and we raised a lot of money, you know. And he says, "I want the checks now." And they wrote checks, you know, it was beautiful. So Hank Greenspun comes to the casino and he leaves his car, the Rolls Royce, right in the middle of the street. And I got to know Hank pretty well. We traveled together, and he's a great, great man. Did a lot of good things. In fact, before I get to this, back to Las Vegas right now, he smuggled arms to Israel, and this was during they already had a ceasefire, and you're not supposed to bring in any arms. So the captain got cold feet, you know, and he didn't want to. It was in the open seas, and he says, "I'm not going to Israel because I don't want to do it." So Hank Greenspun told me the story himself. So he took out the gun and he put it to his head. He says, "You're going to deliver these arms because Israel needs the arms." So he had to do it. He delivered the arms, and then when they came back, of course, he reported them to the authorities, and Hank was arrested, and there was a trial, and the judge was evidently a Zionist, and he got him off with he didn't serve any jail time, and a $10,000 fine, and he got away with that. The only thing, he lost his citizenship. You know, he was American born, and President Kennedy gave him back his civil rights. Yeah, Kennedy. That's how good a Democrat he was. Okay, now we come to Carter. Now Carter, they were good friends, Carter and he supported him. But on the second term, he came to the conclusion that he doesn't like this man. And he decided not only not to support him, he came out and against him, and he gave speeches. He owned the children still own the Las Vegas Sun, the newspaper, and he used to write a column called "Where I Stand," and he was attacking Carter. He says, "Don't vote for him. He's against Israel." And so Carter was very upset. Now I heard this directly from Hank. You know, Hank told me this story. So he said Carter was very upset. So he called him to the White House. So he said, okay. He decided to go. He went in to the Oval Office, and Carter said, "Hank, what are you doing to me? Why are you? Look what I've accomplished. You know, peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. This is all my doing. Camp David. This is all my doing. Why are you so much against it?" And this is what he told me, to show you tough guy, show you a real
Zionist.
a real proud Jew, which I like to hear. I can't stand these that are not proud Jews. I can't stand Bernie Sanders. You know. I call them the non-Jewish Jews. These are non-Jewish Jews. So Hank said, that's what I told the president. I said, "Mr. President, I came to the conclusion that you want to destroy the Jewish state, and I'm not going to be part of it." And he said, I turned around and I walked out the White House. He didn't want to even hear anything from Carter anymore.
Wow.
After, you know, he told him that, you know, I'm a friend of Israel, and I came to the conclusion that you want to destroy the state, and I'm not going to. And that takes guts to walk out, you know.
Sure does. Yes,
President of the United States.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think
ask me.
I think we're good. I think we're good. We got a good amount, and it's Erev Shabbos. But I'll report back to my boss and tell him what we got and see what else he would want if he does. But I thank you very much because
was it smooth enough? Everything?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh no. Sure. For a guy who claimed to be shy, you're pretty good in telling a story, I'd say.
Yeah,
so
I really was. I was, as a child too, I was very, very shy. Oh my gosh. But when you take on the responsibility and you feel that, and even today's anti-Semitism, you asked me about, you know, I even read the Haaretz. And because I want to know what they're saying, and of course the New York Times, we can do so much more to stop this nonsense. I saw where Bougie was a good friend. You know, he used to be our attorney. We had business here, and so I talked to him before he left for Europe for the March of the Living.
Yes.
Yeah,
Made
the headline this morning. I just talked to him 2 days before he called me. We have been friends for a long time, and he's not my party, you know, but he's a good guy. He invited himself to come to Indianapolis to speak at the Hebrew Academy.
Oh, nice!
Because we have Hebrew teachers, and he helped. And actually, I contacted him. I wanted some protectia if he can get me. I want another teacher to stay a year longer, and he did it. He did it for me. Yeah, very nice. So so he talks about anti-Semitism now. We can do so much more. You know, we can do so much more, and what we talked about earlier about, you know, about never again. You know. Mm-hmm. Particularly, I am upset with the what they call diaspora Jews, Jews from Galut. I was here for the. I'm also very friendly with the ambassador, David Friedman. I introduced him. He wanted me to introduce him. I never met him before, and he says he wanted to be sworn in by the vice president, who's a good friend, you know. Mike Pence.
Of course.
He's from my state, and we've been friends for 30 years, even before he was even a congressman. He gives me credit that I'm the one that talked him into becoming a congressman. He used to have a show called the Mike Pence Radio Show, you know, and I heard him and I had lunch with him, and I said, you have to be a congressman, and so he gives me credit. He mentioned me in the speech that he gave 2 years ago at APAC.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he says, Hart is my mentor. I'm his mentor. Okay, so...
They asked for Jews. Why you're disappointed and they asked for Jewry? Yeah, that was what you started saying about that. That you wanted to, about Democrats? No, about American Jews?
Yeah, so we came here, made a special trip, and they dedicated the embassy.
Yes.
You know, David Friedman wanted me to come, and I said, sure. There wasn't one liberal Jew or a Democrat in the crowd. Were you there by any chance?
I was not there, but I know all about it.
And that really tells us all. Mm-hmm. And there are many Jewish congressmen, there are many Jewish senators. Not one showed up. And Schumer didn't show up. And I had a friend of mine from New York. I said, you're a senator? Speaker? He is the minority speaker, yeah. And the Senate. And I said, what'd you do about it? He said, I did ask him, why weren't you there when they dedicated the embassy? Because the Congress voted way back in '95 that the embassy belongs here. Right. America's embassy belongs in Jerusalem. And you don't even show up. And he said, I wasn't invited. That's such a chutzpah to even say that. He doesn't have to, he was invited. Every congressman, not one congressman, not one senator. The only one that came was Lieberman, Joe Lieberman, who was there. No, that tells you more than anything else, you know, that although they made it into a slogan, an empty slogan, if they say, never again, oh, never again. You're doing it right now. We're doing it right now. When Pelosi didn't let this resolution to pass about anti-Semitism, you saw that, you read that, and none of these Jewish so-called leaders, where the hell were you? You couldn't pass it, you know, because of Ilan, whatever her name was, from Minnesota, because she wanted something else. These progressives. Why can't you wake up and go out and do something, you know? The New York Times, if the Jews of New York State, New York City, if they boycott this newspaper, they'll be out of business, you know.
That's why they apologized twice.
Yeah. And nothing is being done. It's you know, just like, you know, shah still, be quiet. You don't speak up. Because, you know, we'll make it worse. You know, a lot of this is all bull. You haven't learned anything from World War II. That is our big problem. And then in Israel too, you've got they quote B'Tselem. That's all I hear is B'Tselem. You know, B'Tselem said this. B'Tselem. What are you talking about, B'Tselem? They should be afraid to even show their faces here, you know. We have a little Jewish state, and I can't believe it, what's happening here.
I agree with you.
And this
I meant one question I meant to ask, if you have a specific answer. In your lifetime,
yeah,
how much money do you think you've raised for anything related to Israel? Whether it's party, the country, a project?
Oh, jeez. I couldn't tell you. I never added it up, but I'm supporting so many things, and we raise money.
You're personally supporting, and you fundraise for others.
Yeah, but that is not I mean,
It's just a number.
yeah.
But people like numbers.
A lot of
$100 million?
A lot of how many?
100 million?
At least.
At least.
Well, much more. But I really don't know a figure, and I can't tell you. I never even thought about it.
What was the best year at Bonds?
Bonds? Selling bonds? Oh my gosh. I asked Menachem Begin to give me Moshe Dayan for Indianapolis to speak. In one evening, we did $6 million, you know, which is...
In Indianapolis, that's incredible.
Per
Capita.
Per capita, it's unheard of, you know. In one evening, you know, and it was so easy because Menachem Begin would do anything if whatever I asked him. And I said, here's the guy. And so I was right there when he asked him. He says, Hart would like for you to come. Rosh HaMemshala, of course, if you say so. And October 1st, 1977, he was there. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to tell you something negative, but
you can.
No, I don't want to.
Negative about
Moshe Dayan.
You won't be the first one to say something negative about Moshe Dayan.
You know, in Yiddish, if you heard that word Hochstapler.
No, no.
Okay. Ask somebody, Hochstapler, write it down.
Hochstapler.
You can't translate it, you know, kind of a...
Okay.
All right.
Let's
anyway,
call it a day. And I thank you tremendously. It's been a pleasure for me.
All right, thank you.
You really
enjoyed it. And in fact, Menachem Begin said, have a footnote. We had an apartment in Herzliya Patuach before this one.
Yes.
And because of him, he said, Hart, you should have a foot in the door. I don't know what he meant exactly.
Who said?
Menachem Begin.
Which door? In Israel. To have something, foothold.
To have a place in Israel.
Yes. Can I just hold this book up for a second so that you can... Oops,
Sure.
I know in Murray Greenfield and the Sun.
Sure, yeah.
Bill?